Well, shortly after a milestone episode of episode 20 of Commentator's Corner, it's time for episode number 21. And alongside me, to my immediate left hand side, we have another man that I have worked alongside in sim racing commentary. A very warm welcome to the show, Mr. Nathan Richards. Nathan, good to see you. Finally, we actually speak face to face, unlike being in this side of a virtual commentary box. How are things?
Good. Yeah, it's nice to be on here. So thanks, Alex, for having me on. And yeah, it's definitely nice to actually see each other once and not be stuck behind that virtual wall. But yeah, it's good to be here, and yeah, I'm quite excited to see where we go tonight.
Indeed. So, Nathan, the first part of the show now, now that we've revised the format a little bit, given it a little bit of a tweak, I still want to hear from you people out there to give your feedback and maybe give me some constructive criticism on what questions I can ask our guests, because there's a whole host still planned, still waiting to be recorded. They've got their time slots, they've got their dates, so we want to hear from you out there. So don't forget, put your comments in the description, underneath the description down below. So, Nathan, first things first, introduce yourself to our audience who may not know who you are.
Hello, yeah, I'm Nathan Richards, 18 from the UK, as you can probably tell from my accent. Sim racing commentator from F1. I've always been a car fan, like my whole life. Currently doing esports at college, level 3 for a diploma. Obviously, mainly towards esports, and also to do a little bit of media work in the future. And yeah, I've got I wouldn't say much of an interest in life. I'm from the middle of the UK, Birmingham. There's nothing much interesting about that at all. But yeah, that's pretty much everything about me.
Yeah, Birmingham, the NEC, the most notable place, actually, I think, in Birmingham, to be honest with you, because of the Autosport International Show every January, which is going to be hitting the NEC again next year. But first things first, how did you get bitten by the motorsport fan? You said you've been a motorsport car nut all your life. How did you get bitten by the bug? And who was the main catalyst? Who was the person that really sort of dragged you, not kicking and screaming, but dragged you in and said, "Have a look at this"?
Well, I suppose motorsport and cars for me is different. I was always a cars fan as a kid, like the classic as a child, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and then obviously when I grew up till about the age of 13, 14, I got quite interested in actual motorsport cars like the GT3s, and Formula One to me was just a fancy, quick, fast car that was the quickest in the world. That's all it was at that point because I obviously
Mm.
never knew much about it. Um, Getting into it itself it wasn't really much of inspiration from anyone. It was kind of just I saw it on the TV, I saw it on the internet, like on Twitter and Facebook when I was younger. So it's kind of like, oh, that looks interesting. And then you kind of get more involved. You see more clips on the internet about it. Obviously, I used to also see clips about Vettel and Hamilton,
Mm.
win their races and all these dramatic crashes and moments, and that kind of also dragged me into it. So yeah, a lot of the action and just moments I've seen on the internet kind of got me more interested. And then obviously my uncle took me to watch a race in Silverstone a while ago, and that's then I think when it really got, kind of my obsession in motorsport.
We'll talk about your uncle taking you to a race weekend very very shortly. But how did you get involved in sim racing commentary? Because everyone has a starting point.
Well, I'd say compared to some, probably one of the weird ones. Obviously, I've always been a gamer.
Mm.
Ever since I was a kid on the Xbox, and I moved over to PC. And I start when literally just when COVID hit, when the lockdown hit, I started playing Euro Truck Simulator 2, and then I joined onto the online side, Truckers MP, if anyone knows what it is. And I joined like there a little company type thing on the game. Met a lot of people in there, all of them Dutch, so they all like Max Verstappen. And I think it was the start, well, mid 2020. There was one of the races, and I think it was when the race at I think the Nurburg was it the Nurburgring of 2020.
Hmm.
Yeah, he was there, and I obviously watched the race. Interesting. I knew a few of the drivers like Hamilton, Rosberg, and although not Rosberg, I mean Hamilton, Vettel, Verstappen, and then obviously 2021 was when it really started. Obviously, the championship rival between Hamilton and Verstappen started. Everyone was saying, "Oh, Verstappen's going to win," because these were all Dutch people, of course. And to watch that race, and it hooked me from then on. And then we went obviously to round 2, 3, and then the championship got good. So I think the first full championship was 2021 for
Mm.
F1, which I think was probably one of the best championships to join. And then obviously, I became a Verstappen fan over time, so it made it even better at the end. So yeah, around that 2021 time, and then obviously esports was like something I never really thought about. It was like, it's just people driving around on a game. But then I tried the F1 2020 game
Yeah.
that all these people that I played with on the truck game told me to buy. Bought it, played it. This was fun. Then I went to 2021. Found a streamer on Twitch who was playing F1 Open lobbies. Joined him, played around. Then he had a league, so I joined the league and. I remember the once we was in a VC, about 5 of us, and we was racing around Coaster, and then one of them said, "Why don't you try and commentate it?" And I said, "Why?" Because to me it was nothing I ever thought about, and I thought, oh, "Okay, I'll do it," and I enjoyed it. And they said, "You know what? You're actually quite good at it." And then out of nowhere, I got a message saying, "Oh, our upcoming race at Baku, we need someone to commentate. Would you be able to stream and commentate for us?" I said, "Yeah, I'll give it a go." And looking back at it, definitely not something to be proud of, but it was where I really thought, "Oh, this is fun." And then obviously I moved on and then 2022 came around. I went to PSGL, then WOR, and I've kind of just been smooth sailing from there.
Yeah, PSGL, the Premier Sim Gaming League, two of the most notable voices from that championship, the likes of Jack Canaan and, of course, the man who is doing absolutely well in esports at the moment. Of course, the Welsh wonder that is Mr. George Morgan. That they've started their careers from that, and George has moved on to like ESLR1. Funny enough, George was our very first guest here on Commentator's Corner, and I think it's one of the most viewed episodes so far. Um, what's been your biggest highlights of your commentary career so far? Because for those that don't know, well, Nathan and I actually we worked together on the Sim Racing Collective 500 series, which
Yeah.
was remind me, it was round 4, and I'm trying to remember the track.
Spa.
There we go, Spa-Francorchamps. We had dry, wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, and we were sort of like we were talking about it, and you said maybe the weather's not going to come back. And what happens? Half an hour before the race ends, we've got rain. Of all places, the wonderful Belgian microclimate. I mean, what would you say have been your biggest highlights of your commentary career so far? Because, like you say, you've only been doing it for a matter of years, and the funny thing is that you've also worked with our previous guest, Zach Sweeney, on a multitude of
Yes.
occasions as well. So, Zach, big up to you. What have been the biggest highlights so far of your commentary career? Of course, taking that first, I wouldn't say tentative step, but that first step where they said, "Well, give it a shot," and then you go, "Oh, I like this. This is a lot more fun than getting behind the wheel and
Yeah.
getting yeeted into the shadow realm," as Jimmy Broadbent would probably say, or like, "Please no Punterino," that kind of thing. What have been the biggest highlights so far for you, Nathan?
I'd say the biggest highlight probably the start. That first time ever commentating. But then I think as of recent, well, moving to PSGL, that was one thing. Obviously, it was a lot more professional, a lot more. There was a lot more going on, a lot quicker drives as well. Instead of people doing like what top 10,000 times around the track. They was doing top 50 times, top 60 times. So it was a lot different. It was a lot more of a, I suppose, a racing s type thing. So
Mm.
that was, I'd say, one of the highlights. And then obviously when was it now? I think it was sometime June, May this year. Um, George was on PSGL F1 with Jack, and well, his PC died halfway through a Mexico race, and then out of nowhere, I got dragged in to the F1 PSGL F1. That was I'd say one of my biggest because it was like, oh, yeah, I'm getting 2,500 people watching me. Normally, I get what 180, so it was quite a big thing that was, and yeah, I'd say that is probably my biggest highlight. Because after that, I started to get a few people to notice me, mainly because you're on, one of the biggest platforms when it comes to F1 league racing. And then if I had to pick one more, it's also probably joining JPBs. It's where I kind of got my first, I'd say, more of a business perspective of commentating.
Mm. Yeah, because when Nathan and I worked together, he was on color commentary and also on the broadcast cams. I think if I remember correctly, and I was on lead. And
Hmm.
it was a really really great race. We had great, even though we didn't have. Let's be honest, we didn't have the biggest grid, but it was for sure exciting because you throw
Hmm.
Spa GT3 and a mixture of weather. You know you've got a recipe for a great race. So we now come back to, you mentioned your uncle earlier on. So did he take you to the first ever motorsport event that you attended? So when was it?
Hmm.
Where? And what did you end up watching trackside?
So, it was kind of it was a weird one because it was obviously I think a few days after my birthday. I can't remember the exact date. 2017, just after my birthday, and he said to me, he said, "Oh, you've heard of Silverstone?" I said, "Yeah," and he said, "Well, there's some racing going on there. Do you want to, go and have a watch?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." It was only £10 entry. It was relatively cheap. There was lots of racing going all day, and got there. We sat at what was it now? Farm curve on the right side, exit of the pit lane on the right
Oh,
grandstand.
so on the international pit straight, so you've got Abbey,
Hmm.
you've got Farm, you've got Village,
Yeah,
and then you've got the run through to Aintree, heading down
yeah.
uh down the Wellington Straight, heading in towards Brooklands and Luffield before they go onto the national pit straight. So yeah, Silverstone has evolved since I first visited it back in 19. I'm going back old school. 1991, Senna versus Mansell, McLaren versus Williams, and well, you can guess which year that title was won. But it was the third and final title that Ayrton Senna ever actually captured in F1, and I
Yeah.
still remember that was when Bridge Corner was still being used way back when, and now it's not part of the circuit layout, but it still
Mhm.
is in the track. But it's just like you think, God. And I still remember at that point I was 14 years of age. It was first ever F1 event. We got up at 5 in the morning. So it was me, my mum, my sister, my dad. We were in the queuing traffic for race day, and I still remember those V10s howling like nobody's business at 18,000 RPM. I had a stinging headache because I didn't get enough sleep the night before, but I was still enamored by it. Um, right, well, I have had. There's one section which I talk about funny moments. So we don't necessarily now look at funny moments on social media, but have there been any funny moments when you've been on a broadcast and something hilarious has happened? Now we have
Mhm.
talked about this beforehand about a certain individual, but has there been a funny moment where someone's dropped a clanger?
Well, I remember back now. I was still laughing because it was funny. It's on my TikTok actually. I was doing a team event championship on F1 called CTC, and I was alongside someone called Joshua Birch, and we was commentating. We come to the end, and we got to the end of the stream. We was like, doing our final words, goodbye. And I remember saying to them, "We'll be back. We'll be back for Monza, so we'll see you next Tuesday." And then Josh shouted at me, he's going, "You can't say that." I'm like, "What? What?" And then I realised and was like, "Oh, but that was
Oh dear, he
one
took
of
it.
the best moments ever."
So in other words, he took it the wrong way, but because of the fact that the schedule was for, well, we'll see you next Tuesday,
Tuesday.
which is completely, and it's you know what? That is absolutely hilarious that someone takes what you say in the closing words completely wrong. They go like, "You can't say that." Yes, you can, because it's next Tuesday. That's when the next race is. That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. I never thought I'd hear. I thought I'd heard everything to people dropping Freudian slips when they're closing off the stream or whatever. But that's absolute. That's absolutely priceless. I bet he's never let you forget that one, has he?
No, no. And I never forgot it either. It was honestly, we sat there for about 5 minutes after laughing. We had to, we ended the stream, and I think you could actually hear us laughing throughout it at the end because it was one of those kind of out of nowhere moments where he's talking normal, straight face, and then all of a sudden he goes, "You can't say that," and I'm like, "What?" And it's that was great. And then also in the chat as well, people noticed it after I did, and they was also talking about it. But it was yeah, that's gonna be I'd say probably the only funny moment I've ever had, apart from the one with Zach. That is, it's gonna be the best. It was still great. I've got it on TikTok actually. If I'll probably show you afterwards if you want to see it.
Yes, definitely, because I spoke with Zach and he talked about his experience at Formula E, which was brilliant, where the height difference between him and Cam Roger was considerable. It's like Zach had the Richard Hammond style complex, if you will,
Mhm.
which I always relate to all the time when someone's like taller than me. Say, for instance, Jardier, Yaroslav Honzik, who's over 6'2", and I'm 5'8". I'm a short ass. I'm proud of it. But I looked and I was like thinking, everyone's the same height in this sim. And you see everybody, you're like, hang on, I need like a beer crate, a beer bottle crate underneath my feet to actually be eye level with Jardier, which was absolutely priceless. And there's actually a funny story because there is a future guest planned on this show. You all know him as Glove Pup or Paul Glover, very, very good friend, was actually working with me at the Sim Racing Expo. And we were doing the walk around the pit, the paddock, like where all the teams had set up. So
Mhm.
you had Veloce, Yaz Heat, Williams, Door Esports, Renvelton, Get Closer, Geeks Energy, Redline, and everybody like that. Redline were doing the GT 500, which, funny enough, was the last ever time Maximilian Benecke competed under the Team Redline banner before
Mhm.
the most ridiculous, silly season in esports happened right before ESLR 1. Um, and then he ended up joining Moritz Lerner, the tallest man in sim racing, Yuri Kasdorp, and Patrick Holtzman. And
Yeah.
I still remember that race like it was that race weekend like it was yesterday, even though it was a LAN event. And Paul went up to interview Jardier, and Jardier had just taken a bite of a cookie, and he's gone, "Oh, Jardier,
Mhm.
would you like Jardier's like this?" And he's trying to chomp down the cookie, and I said he's caught him mid bite, started laughing, and walked off. And that's what happens sometimes when things happen on air. Now you mentioned about racing drivers. With the Dutch contingent, you became a Max Verstappen fan. Are there any other drivers that you sort of like, consider as favourites alongside Max, whether it be in Formula One or other categories in single seaters or sports cars, maybe?
I'd say Fernando Alonso. He's kind of Max is the one I've supported now, but I think throughout all my life, I've always heard the name Fernando Alonso, whether it be from a family member or something on the TV. Alonso and Hamilton. I'm not as keen on Hamilton, but Alonso, is a name I hear a lot. So it's kind of like, it's always nice to see him here. And also, is what the most experienced is 42 years old. He's racing in, I'd say, with the car he's got, probably one of his best seasons. So yeah, it's nice to see him obviously doing well alongside Max, who's running away with this championship. So yeah, those are the two ones I like. And then obviously when it comes to you've always liked the likes of Senna and Prost, but unfortunately I wasn't alive back then.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say they're idols, but I've never actually witnessed them race or anything ever.
Yeah, folks, there is a fantastic podcast that has recently been released with Fernando Alonso, 41 years of age, two-time Formula One world champion,
Hmm.
with ex-F1 anchor and the host of the High Performance podcast, Jake Humphrey, where it is a 1 hour warts and all, where like Fernando Alonso actually opens up, and it's a real. So I'm going to link that in the description below, folks, because it is a fantastic podcast. And you know what? Jake Humphrey was one of the people, came from CBBC TV, jumped into Formula One, and gelled with a lot of people in the paddock, especially with the likes of DC, Mark Webber. Whisper Films came about, and you see now how Jake Humphrey is just on such a high level. When he was considered, oh yeah, he's a former kids presenter. What the hell does he know about F1? But he's such a knowledgeable guy, and he's very, very attuned to his craft. So if you get a chance, folks, have a look at the link in the description. Click on it, because I've watched it literally within 5 hours of it being dropped on YouTube. And I have to say, Jake, you've done a fantastic job with high performance. Keep it up, mate. Really, really cool. Yeah, Fernando Alonso, he has just shown everybody that he hasn't lost his mojo at all, even at 41 years of age. I mean, Kimi Raikkonen, until he left Alfa Romeo to retire from Formula One. Now his son Robin is racing in Rotax in
Yeah.
karting, so the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But that's really good that you've got the the current the current driver who is the one to beat, and you've got one that beat Schumacher on
Hmm.
at the peak of his powers in 2005 and 2006, where it was between Benetton and Ferrari, or
Yeah.
Renault and Ferrari, to go for the big marbles in Formula One. Um, Now, have you actually met any racing drivers in person, or when you've been doing one of your casts at all?
Um, well, I suppose racing drivers in terms of IRL, I've met a few. It wasn't like I spoke a conversation with them. I went to Donington Park last year and went down the pit walk and I spoke to a few of the GT3 drivers. The one I know, well, the one I remember the most, just because I saw him in Formula E, was I think Alexander Sims is his name, the one with the glasses. I don't know, that's why I remember him,
Yes,
but
yes,
yeah,
Alexander Sims. Yeah, very, very great. He's a great ambassador for British racing. Unfortunately, was in that Corvette that had that massive incident at Le Mans last year,
yeah.
this year, whilst leading in the final ever GTE race, because the WEC for next year goes to LMGT3. We've already had a discussion before that, before we went on air, didn't we, Nathan? Where we just like thinking,
Yeah.
just call it GT3. Just don't try and add, additional letters to the acronym. But did you feel a little bit sort of like a pinch yourself moment, or did you feel starstruck? So like, holy shit, that's Alexander Sims there.
Yeah, because obviously he was one of the drivers that I knew. I've seen him on the TV. I've seen him on multiple interviews in the past as well on YouTube. So it was like, it's kind of like surreal seeing this person that seen on the TV, in real life with his teammate, with the car, with his racing suit. It was really good to see. And obviously, a lot of drivers there as well. Really nice people, a lot of them, handshaked, they signed all your autographs. I didn't know half of them, but there was all great people. I know a few of them now.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was great people to talk to, and yeah, it was really nice to meet some of these drivers. And obviously on casting, I've spoke to a few of the esports drivers, like lots of Yarno and Lucas Blakely,
Mm.
after some of the PSG and WR races. But when it comes to meeting race drivers, that's about it. Unfortunately, haven't yet to meet an F1 driver, but hopefully that happens one day.
Touch wood on that one for you, Nathan.
Hmm.
Um, okay, commentary inspirations. Now, this is something I ask all my guests that are commentators. Are there any particular individuals that have sort of inspired you to look to progress and move forward and strive to be the best that you can be and bring your own style to the mix?
I'd say mainly there's two. One from IRL and one from esports. The IRL one, Davy Croft. Bit of a boring answer. I don't see many people actually like him, but I'm obviously a lot newer to motorsport. He was the
Hmm.
one I suppose, in Formula One grew up with. Obviously from 2021. I've always loved his over enthusiastic attitude to commentate. All the moments like the through goes Hamilton. Here comes Sebastian Vettel. To me, that gives me those goosebump moments, which many other commentators didn't do. Obviously, Murray Walker, one of the greatest, but I was never alive then. I never really
Yeah.
heard much of his commentary. And then when it comes to esports, George Morgan, obviously, when I joined PSG, he was at the top at that time, and he still is. Doing F1 with Jack. And it's just, I think the way he portrays himself on social media as well, very professional. But he can also have that jokey side. I was in VC with him multiple times, and you can kind of see that professional side's still there, but you can have a bit of a laugh and a joke with him. He's, kind of a chilled back kind of guy. But also when it comes to esports commentary, obviously I wouldn't say I want to be him, but I strive to, do similar things to him, and hopefully in the future progress to IRL
Hmm.
motorsport, or just to keep progressing in esports for commentary.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is that I finally met the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. George Morgan, at the week of the CrowdStrike 24 Hours of Spa. And I still remember, like, he said, "Yeah, I've just been so busy." I said, "Look, because I was there working for Eau Rouge Simulators and SimiCube, doing content
Mhm.
as we were guests of Team WRT for that week, and I was only there until the Thursday. So what's quite funny is that week was quite seminal because a lot of people
Mhm.
that I had either kept in touch with or knew about or had spoken to or worked with, um, it was kind of like everyone from the virtual space meeting in the same location, which I felt was pretty cool.
Mhm.
It was a shame because I didn't take a selfie photo of it. But it was like having those memories in your head which live with you forever. They do say that a picture paints a thousand words. And I remember phoning George up, and I was in the pit lane just by AF Corsa and qualifying for the initial qualifying stage for Super Pole the following day for the CrowdStrike 24. George and I met outside of the AF Corsa garage. Then it started pissing it down with rain, so we then decided to go to the Fanatec Arena, and the rain had just got on really, really bad. And then all of a sudden, I meet up with Paul Jeffrey, catch up with my good friend Mike Yao and Steve Proudly, and Alessio, who runs AK Informatica, as in the esports side of it, was there, but didn't introduce myself, which I felt I should have done. But you know what? There's always a next time. And then the following day, there's me, Ash Vanderlei, Lewis McGlade, Cam Roger, Rory Alexander from Veloce. Like, there's this massive conglomeration of people in the esports space. Luke Whitehead, who I will be honest, is the only esports driver that can pull off a very, very dodgy Hawaiian shirt and get away with it. Luke, you've been warned. Yeah, great to catch up with him. Also, caught up with Alistair Young, Alex Young, ex Minardi F1's F1, his son was there, along with the Leaf Hamilton, who's competed in GT, Gran Turismo. And it was just really, really cool, just like meeting all these people from the virtual space. And it was no Discord server, no cameras needed, no OBS or vMix or whatever to sort of record everything like we're doing now. And it was just one of those cool moments. And George and I messaged each other. I messaged him later and I said, "Were you absolutely soaked?" Well, no, I remember speaking to him because obviously that weekend, folks, is the weekend when we lost Ilana Ventov in Formula Regional in Fricka, and George was commentating on that race. And I phoned him up the week after and said, "Look, I'm just checking on you, making sure you're okay." And we then had a funny conversation about, I said, "How soaked were you when you got to the car?" He said, "I was absolutely sopping wet." I said, "Yeah, I was there for all the way through to the end of Q4, and there was rivers coming down the hill that I was walking up." He went, "Bloody hell." So it just goes to show that, yes, George is incredibly professional. He's a great guy. He's one of the prominent voices of ESLR1, along with Lewis McGlade, along with Ewan O'Leary and Arjuna Kankapati, because they had the Gamers 8 in Riyadh quite recently, with Jardier being on the casting for that as well. But that's really cool that David Croft. Now, I remember speaking to Crofty, and I interviewed him in 2012 or 13. I can't remember which one. And I said to him, "What advice would you give to a commentator looking to move up the ranks?" And he said, and the sentence that has stuck with me ever since, and thank you, Crofty, for this. I need to get him on the show as well, because that'll be a big old episode. That I tell you that much. I think, well, the phrase that sticks with me is, "Don't give anyone a reason to tell you no," and that has stuck with me. That has stuck with me, and it was all because of Crofty. So Crofty, top bloke. Even though he does get a little bit of hate thrown his way, but you know what? The guy's a top bloke. Originally from, he's still a West Ham fan. He's still, is salt of the earth from Stevenage, not too far outside. The hometown of Lewis Hamilton, of course, not too far outside of Rye House, where Lewis cut his teeth as a karter. Right, top 3 moments that pop into your head in motorsport, be it IRL or sim racing, involving other commentators in the broadcast. So this doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a broadcast that you are involved with, but are there any that stick out in your mind that involve other commentators where you've just gone, that's a moment for me?
Oh, well, the one of them was actually with me and George. It was the first time we ever commentated together. It was actually only a couple of weeks back at Austria for PSGL F1, and we had 3, 4, 5 drivers all fighting for one position, obviously first, and we had about 6 or 7 laps of overtaking Den at turn 3 and turn 4 every single time. And sometimes I had to sit back and just take a breather, and because it was phenomenal. Obviously, you saw many of these drivers. A few of them have had their own rivalries, not always the most passive rivalries with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it was great to see those race and take it cleanly, which obviously, if anyone has been watching the league racing in F1 recently, it hasn't been the best in terms of the driving standards. So to take it back to what we saw in 2021, 2020 with the clean drive and all these drivers all fighting for that one position, it was great. And obviously George as well. Sometimes obviously George has always had these great sayings. It's is it pedal to the metal, go 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 go. all stuff like that, and also the way you can. I think I like the way he uses words. He uses words you don't normally use or hear, which sometimes you sit back and think, "Oh, I'll keep that one in my mind." And yeah, that was one of them, which was a good moment with obviously other broadcasters. And then I don't know after that because I just think there's been that many, and I think well, there's actually there is one, which was 2021 Abu Dhabi with Crofty, obviously final lap. People will hate it because it's a controversial title, but for me, it was the fact of no matter what happened, I was there for Verstappen. You know, you're screaming, shouting, come on!" And obviously Crofty's there. You know, obviously talking through what's happened. You got Brunder as well popping in. That was another moment. You know, it was 3-4 minutes of full goosebumps and excitement, and also a bit of worrying, thinking, "Oh, who's going to win?" So yeah, those are
Yeah,
probably the two moments which I think from other broadcasters, what has been is what I've loved. They're all great moments.
and you still get goosebumps talking about them, don't you?
Oh yeah, all the time. But sometimes I'll actually watch back to the 2021 race because I'll say that's my dopamine rush.
Mhm. Yeah, true. Very, very, very true. I mean, the thing is, sometimes you can have so many memories in your mind that it's difficult to pick some out, but there are always those one, two, or three
Mhm.
that really sort of stick out in your brain. What are your future goals in commentary? Now, obviously, we talked at the top end of the show. We asked you to introduce yourself that you want to get into IRL commentary. Are there any sort of goals that either for short term or long term that you're looking to pursue? Because we all know that the thing is with us Brits, we seem to be in demand for international broadcasts, whether it be sim racing, whether it be IRL, and it's the international motorsport language. Um, the thing is, like, I've been over to Lithuania and Latvia this year, and they have said it's because then you've not only have you got the Latvians and the Lithuanians, but then you've got Estonia, you've got a couple of Norwegians, the Georgians, the Finns. They all understand English. I mean, where would you like to see yourself in? Let's put a parochial sort of timescale on this. Let's say by the time you're 25, 28 years of age, where would you like to see yourself in the future?
I think the main goal for me is to be able to do this as a job, to be able to earn money, not have to do a normal 9 to 5 shift, do something a lot different to a lot of jobs are similar, working in a shop, working in an office. This, I think, if this was to make it my job, it will be something great because it's a lot different. It's not normal. It's very, what's the word, niche. So
Hmm.
it will be something I'd like to be able to, live off full time because as much as you enjoy it. Obviously, if you're in it full time, you get more opportunities. You'll be able to travel more because that's another thing. I've always been someone who likes to travel.
Hmm.
So obviously, you get these opportunities IRL. You get to go to other countries in Europe, sometimes maybe countries in Asia or the Middle East. So I think that is also another goal to be able to travel while doing commentary, doing what I love, and meeting all these drivers from different areas because you get to learn their culture. And sometimes you notice the drivers from different countries, they all have their they all kind of group themselves in different ways. Like you have drivers from the UK who
Hmm.
might have these certain characteristics. You go to France maybe, and they have the same set of characteristics, but catered to them and their culture. So I think that's another thing that is very good. So you get to learn their culture through racing.
Hmm. It's a very good point you raised there, Nathan. I mean, in my commentary career, I've had the opportunity to commentate in the Sultanate of Oman in the GCC, which was for those wondering, like my karting travels have taken me. Like when I started in 2017, Chris McCarthy was the man that really sort of helped be the catalyst for my commentary career. I got on to Daytona D-Max, which was Arrive and Drive. The main proprietor of that now in the UK is Club 100. Shout out John Vigor. He does a fantastic job with that, and also the British Universities Karting Championship, the BUKC. And then Chris gave me the chance to go to Europe, and then in 2020 and 2021, when the pandemic was all happening, when people were starting to be able to travel again, I was able to. At that point, I was on furlough. I'd been in the automotive industry for just over 2 decades. And it was a constant, like, yeah, 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 we're going to be back in 2 months. No, we're extending it by another month, and so on and so forth. And I thought, well, hang on a second, the writing's on the wall very, very shortly. So early July, the EU opens its doors. and says we're going to allow 75 countries to start coming back into the European Union again. So the borders were open. And that was at the point where the UK decided we're still sitting on the fence. We don't know what we're going to do yet. And I was due to have a commentary in Belgium that weekend, and I couldn't go. And it was the first ever commentary for a championship that I had been a part of since late 2018 that I was not able to do. So I had to call in the cavalry, which was my good friend Guillaume Alvarez, a previous guest on this show. So when everything was going on and people were afraid of traveling, afraid they were going to catch COVID, I was traveling all over the shop. I traveled to Germany multiple times in August and September of that year. And, PCR tests and everything like that. 2021, it went up another level because I ended up going to the Sultanate of Oman because I got a phone call in July of that year from a man called Guy Sheffield from Al Ain Raceway, a Brit who now is based in the UAE. And he said, "What's your availability for November? I need a commentator for Oman because Henry Baudet can't make it." I was like thinking, oh crap. Like, these opportunities don't come along. And I'd already been asked by Rotax to do the daily reports for the first ever trip to the Persian Gulf. So within 4 weeks, folks, I was in the Sultanate of Oman for the MENA Karting Championships Nations Cup, then met soon-to-be newly instigated FIA president, Mohammed bin Sulayem, in person and actually had a conversation with him after the presentation at Muscat Raceway. Very, very eloquently spoken gentleman, always smiling, never had a bad word to say about anybody, contrary to reports that have been surfacing on social media. That was my first impression of Mohammed bin Sulayem. Very, very gentle, very, very appreciative, and complimented me on my work that weekend, which I have to say was, hand on heart, one of the biggest pinch me moments of my career. And then to go to the Bahrain International Karting Circuit, right by the circuit itself for Formula One. 3 weeks later for the Rotax Grand Finals in 2021. My second trip to the GCC, but my first trip to Bahrain. And yeah, like you say, travel is something that, okay, yeah, not everybody understands. What we do is quite intense, that like you're against the schedule, especially if it's IRL, that you are flying out to the nearest airport. You're then traveling either to the track or to the hotel. For instance, Bahrain, I landed at midnight. I had to get a taxi to the Amouage Islands, which is 45 minutes drive away from the Sakhir International Circuit. And it's pitch black. I had to get myself a Bahrain SIM card for my phone so I could get data, I could use WhatsApp, whatever. Get a taxi. I arrived just before 1 o'clock in the morning. My colleague from Rotax, Natalie, was there to give me my organisation pass and said, we'll get all your uniforms sorted tomorrow, when we're at the track. I said, that's fine, it's not a problem. And then for the rest of that week, I was at the hotel, sleeping, showering, getting up, breakfast, out the door, over to the track. And you're not seeing much of the locality. So, folks, when you think that, us commentators might be us that have the affordability, which I hope in the not too distant future, Nathan, you have the chance to do yourself, to travel and experience these places, is that you have to grab these fleeting moments whilst you can. Try and understand the culture. Because with the Rotax Grand Finals, we had close to 370 drivers from 50 plus nationalities. Last year in Portimao in November, for the first ever time, I met Rubens Barrichello and his son Eduardo, who are both competing. So you've got a man who's done over 300 Grand Prix, been that close to winning an F1 title, has raced with the biggest teams in Formula One. Williams, Brawn, where he nearly also could have got the championship that year alongside Jenson Button. And then we see his eldest son in the same event. And I went, and Rubens had just gone into scrutineering to get his race suit and his helmet checked. And I went, you know what? This is my opportunity to go over and introduce myself. And we got talking. And you know what? The lovely thing about people like Rubens Barrichello is that they are just people like the rest of us. You treat
Mm.
people like how you want to be treated. And this has come a little bit full circle because Rubens and Eduardo have again qualified for this year's grand finals in Bahrain. And earlier on this year, I had the opportunity to commentate on the fourth round of the Stock Car Pro Series, which is the Brazilian, effectively Brazil's answer to the British touring cars. And Rubens and Eduardo are racing the same series as teammates.
Mhm.
Race one, Eduardo's making his way up the grid. Rubens had a bit of a mixed bag. Race two, Rubens is out of the race, and by the pit stop circulations, Eduardo is leading, and I call him across the line to win his first race. And I've already done a screen capture that when I see Rubens and Eduardo this year at the grand finals, I go, guys, I cannot believe this, that I commentated on both of you and you went and won it. And you were so like literally, Rubens 2 laps from the end, folks. I'm going to play the clip in a minute for those on this, and Nathan, I will share the timestamp. Well, I will share with you the link to the Motorsport TV broadcast, and a big thank you to Jake Sanson for giving me the chance to step in. That 2 laps from the end, Rubens' eyes looked like it was the Hoover Dam waiting to explode. That's how much it means to Rubens for Eduardo to pick up his first victory in Stock Car Pro Series. So yeah, like you say, the having the opportunity to travel and to get to experience these different cultures, it is something that, as much as people say to me, you don't have the time, and I go, it's not always about having the time. Sometimes it's about making the time. That's all the difference. But my final question to round up what's been a brilliant episode number 21. Thanks very much for doing this, Nathan. Really, really do appreciate it. That if you had no budget, no glass ceiling, so the money is unlimited, which road or race car would you choose? I know it might be a tough one because Zach went road and race car for very good reason. But if you had the opportunity, what road or race car would you pick, and which location would you drive it at?
That is, yeah, that is. Well, there's so many cars and tracks. Well, car, I'd be probably more leaning towards to say Formula One, of course.
Mm,
Probably the old V10 engines.
okay.
One of those around what track? Silverstone is a great one, but a track that I've always liked, Imola. I've always loved that
Oh
track.
yes, yes.
So I'd say Formula One, 90s car around Imola.
Okay, I like that. I like that at all. I'm gonna echo your sentiments here because we're talking cars from the 1990s. We're talking Formula One. We're talking circuits that were old school back then.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go with the circuit first, and this is going to be a surprise, maybe not at all a surprise, based on the fact that I'm an eighth German by descent. But I'm not talking about the Hockenheim we know now. I'm talking about the Hockenheim that used to go through the forests at 200 plus miles an hour, where a certain
Mhm.
Nelson Piquet decided to try and karate kick Elio De Angelis downstairs way back when in the late 80s. De Angelis actually took Piquet out, and Piquet tried to go all Bruce Lee on him. That
Mhm.
has done the round on Instagram. That's done it on YouTube Shorts and memes and everything. So if you look it up on YouTube, it's one of those moments. The car that I would pick now, I am torn between two, so I'm going to choose the two. The first one, before the Ferrari F2004 became the most dominant car in F1 history, there was one before it, and I'm talking about a car that was in 1988's F1 Championship. None other than the Honda-powered McLaren MP44. But then, if you want to go a little bit further forward, let's say 1992, it is the car Red 5 that a certain Mr. Sebastian Vettel now actually owns. It is the Williams Renault FW 14B Red 5. So I think that's pretty. We're on the same wavelength there, aren't we,
Mhm.
really?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think if we talk specific car from the 90s, I've always liked the Williams, the livery. I think it's a livery. I've always liked it. I've never really seen the cars like I've never really seen many of the cars from then, but the Williams is the one I've always loved. Now, unfortunately, not as good as they were. But back then, yeah, it'd probably be the Williams or the McLaren that I would have picked. But yeah, one of those two from the 90s. I think they're the best sounding cars. They look like the best cars to drive. Then obviously to go along with Imola, which is a very difficult track, a track that's also not had the best history, but it's got to be one of my favourites. It's hard, and I've played it on the F1 game. It's probably one of my worst, but it's a track I can always love, and I think my favourite corner on the circuit is probably Aqua Minerale.
Yes. I like Rivazza, which is the double left-hander before
Mhm.
the excessively long start-finish straight towards
Yeah.
the now profiled Tamburello, which back in the day was, of course, the corner that Gerhard Berger had his fiery accident at. And then, of course, on May 1st, 1994, we lost Ayrton Senna. The day before, we lost Roland Ratzenberger. And I mentioned this guy once already, a certain driver by the name of Rubens, a very fresh-faced Rubens Barrichello, running for Eddie Jordan's
Mhm.
team in the Jordan Peugeot, had a bit of a moment before Aqua Minerale and was declared medically unfit to race that weekend. It's quite funny how it could have been
Oh.
3 people we could have lost that weekend, folks.
Yeah.
So always remember, don't just remember Ayrton, but also remember Roland and remember what
Hmm.
could have been. Because back then, it was a very, very different situation in Formula One to what it is now, with the halo saving multiple lives, including some of the current grid, including Guan Yu Zhou with his incident at Silverstone. After the incident with George Russell, that was last year, but that was a multi-car incident. Charles Leclerc, when he was when he was with his first season in Formula One, let's not forget, the halo saved his bacon. But yeah, I know it's a bit of a somber way to sort of close things out, but Nathan, thank you very much for jumping on the show, mate. Where can people find you on socials? And I will put those links in the description down below.
Well, a lot of people have tons of socials, but I only have two: Twitter and TikTok. My Twitter, or X, I should say, is
Yeah.
Richie F1. The eyes put them as one, so R1CH1EF1. And then my TikTok, I believe, is just Nathan Richards one, something like that. But obviously, you'll see in the description, so you can just click on the link, and yeah, you can get to me there. But yeah, thanks, Alex, for having me on. It's great. It's the first time I've done some sort of podcast, and it's been quite nice to have a chat, obviously, as well with yourself, who's obviously done a lot of commentary, a lot older than me, so you know a
I
lot
know,
more, a
I
lot more
know.
experienced.
You
So
know,
yeah, it's nice to be able to
yeah,
talk about our experiences.
exactly. Well, considering the fact that not only Zach, I'm old enough to be his old man, it's the same with Nathan as well. It's but you know what? The thing is like we have to give kudos to people like Zach, people like Nathan, who are the young up and comers. You know, it's not about the fact that we have to look at. And there was a very good point actually that I think we need to talk on, Nathan, before we close things off. That even though people might be young in age, there is always this constant learning for progression, isn't there? We talked about this earlier on in the show, and it's always about getting the relevant advice from the right people. And it's always that sort of like that hunger. You want to do this as a full-time job, which I completely admire and respect. I mean, motorsport's been my full-time job, my life for 12 years, but in September 2020, when I got made redundant, that changed to being
Mhm.
my full-time, my raison d'etre, my reason for living right now. And I really admire the fact that you've said my future goal is to do this full time. And that's a great goal to set yourself towards, because you know that you've got to constantly push and
Mhm.
evolve yourself and pick up tricks, pick up tips, pick up advice, and always go with your gut on what you think is probably the best course of action for yourself. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think obviously now I'm doing esports at college, and there's a lot of media thrown into it, and there's a whole section about commentating, which for me is good. Yes, education isn't always the way, but I think obviously I've got to be in education from when I was 16 till 18, so there's no better way to at least learn some skills that can help me in the future. And also when it comes to esports, that's something that obviously, like I said before, I've always played games, so anything to do with esports is something I enjoy. So whether it's doing the commentating and what I've done in the past, which is managing the F1 community teams within the community, stuff like that, it's all something I enjoy. And obviously, commentating I think is at the top by a mile. But just saying in the future, I'm like, right. So I enjoy commentating. It's not, I can't take this full time yet. You can jump into other things as well, and it can all contrast together, especially when it's all to do with esports.
A very, very well measured and well recognized point there, Nathan. Again, can't thank you enough, buddy, for jumping on the show. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on as well. It's been great. Like I said before, it's the first time I've done a podcast, so it's nice to do something a little bit different, and obviously talk about our experiences and what I want to do in the future. And yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun.
Indeed. Well, a big thank you to Nathan being my guest here on episode 21 of Commentator's Corner. Don't forget you can follow myself on the relevant social medias in the links down below, of course. This is available not just as a video podcast here on my YouTube channel, but is also available audio only, so you can listen back 100% free at your leisure on the following platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts. Folks, thank you very much for watching. If you are listening on the audio only podcast, thank you for listening. We'll see you again soon for episode 22 here on Commentator's Corner. And from myself and Nathan, it's goodbye for now.